My commanding officer told my husband's mistress, "You know you'll never win against her." I never thought I'd be the kind of person who ended up in the middle of a cheating scandal, but life has a funny way of proving you wrong. My husband Jason and I had been together for 10 years, married for 6. We were both in the military, stationed at the same base. Our marriage had its ups and downs like anyone else's, but I believed we were solid. Then Amanda came along and everything changed. She was a civilian contractor who worked in logistics. I had heard about her long before I ever spoke to her. She had a reputation for flirting with anyone in uniform, and there were plenty of jokes about how she always seemed to accidentally end up alone with married men. I never thought much of it. Jason had never given me a reason to doubt him before, and I had more important things to worry about than gossip. I was busy with my own responsibilities, my own career, my own life. But then he started acting different, and suddenly Amanda wasn't just a joke anymore. At first I told myself I was imagining things. He had always been dedicated to his job, so staying late wasn't unusual. He had always been a friendly guy, so him talking to her at work didn't mean anything. But then I started noticing patterns. He was staying late a lot more, and always on nights, when I had my own shifts or responsibilities. He started carrying his phone with him everywhere, even places he never used to. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe I was just overanalyzing. But then there was the biggest red flag of all, his behavior at unit events. We had formal dinners, ceremonies, and group gatherings where spouses were expected to be there. Jason had always been the kind of husband who kept a hand on my back, who introduced me proudly to his coworkers, who made sure I never felt out of place. But when Amanda was in the room, something changed. I caught her looking at him way too much. And worse, I caught him looking back. It wasn't just casual glances, it was tension, nervousness, like they both knew they were playing a dangerous game and hoping I wouldn't catch on. That's when I started paying closer attention. The final straw came when I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. I had just finished a workout and was walking out of the gym when I passed a group of junior enlisted guys standing near the entrance. I wasn't paying attention until I heard Jason's name. I didn't stop at first, but then one of them laughed and said, "Man, his wife has no idea." Another guy responded, "She probably does. You think she's just ignoring it?" Someone else added, "Nah, dude, he's careful. Amanda's the one who's sloppy. You see how she looks at him when his wife is around?" I didn't hear anything else after that because I walked straight to my car, gripping my keys so hard my hand ached. I sat there, staring straight ahead, feeling my stomach twist into knots. I had spent months convincing myself that I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into Jason's behavior, that Amanda was just another coworker. But now I knew I had been right all along. I could have confronted him the second he got home. I could have accused him, demanded answers, made a scene. But what would that get me? He would lie, he would deny, he would say I was overreacting. I didn't want to fight. I wanted proof. That night, I waited until he was asleep before I went through his phone. I knew his password. He had never bothered to change it because he had never thought I would check. He wasn't dumb enough to leave anything in his main messages, but he was dumb enough to leave things in his deleted folder. And that's where I found everything. Texts from Amanda. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I hate that we have to sneak around, but she'll never find out. You know I'm better for you than she is." I stared at the messages, feeling an eerie sense of calm settle over me. If I had read them a few months ago, I probably would have cried. I probably would have broken down, wondering where I had gone wrong, why I hadn't been enough. But now all I felt was cold, calculating anger. I forwarded every single message to myself. Then I took screenshots, making sure I had copies saved in multiple places. I wasn't just going to confront him, I was going to ruin him. But first, I had to act normal. The next morning, Jason got up like nothing had changed. He showered, got dressed, kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door. "I'll be home late," he said. "Gotta wrap up some things at work." I smiled. "Of course. See you later." I spent the rest of the day setting my plan in motion. I wasn't going to just leave him. That would have been too easy. No, I was going to make sure everyone saw him for who he really was. I went through our bank statements and flagged every suspicious charge. He had been taking Amanda to dinner, buying her gifts, and using our shared account to do it. That was all the proof I needed. I gathered everything, his texts, the financial records, even old pictures from unit events where Amanda had been way too close to him. I wasn't just making this a personal problem. I was making it a professional one. The military doesn't take infidelity lightly, especially when it involves someone cheating with a subordinate. And Jason was about to find that out the hard way. I made an appointment with my commanding officer for the next day. I didn't tell Jason. I didn't give him any warning. That night, I laid next to him in bed, listening to him breathe, knowing that when he woke up, his entire world was about to come crashing down. Because this wasn't just going to be a breakup, it was going to be a takedown. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling more awake than I had in months. Jason was still asleep, completely unaware that his entire life was about to implode. I got ready, made coffee, and kissed him goodbye like nothing was wrong. He mumbled something about working late again, and I smiled, telling him to have a great day. He had no idea that before the end of the day, I'd be sitting in our commanding officer's office, laying out every piece of evidence against him. I arrived at the office with everything I needed, printed screenshots, bank statements, and every little detail he thought I would never find. My commanding officer, a woman who had been in the service longer than both of us combined, gestured for me to sit the moment I walked in. She didn't waste time with small talk. "What's going on?" I placed the folder in front of her. "This is a formal complaint against Sergeant Jason Mitchell." Her eyes flicked to the name, then back to me. "Your husband?" "Yes, ma'am, my husband. And I have proof that he's been having an affair with Amanda Hensley, a civilian contractor working in logistics." She didn't react, just opened the folder and started flipping through. The text messages, the receipts, the photos, everything was there. I had arranged it so there was no room for doubt. She took her time, reading over every detail, before finally looking up at me. "And what exactly do you want to happen here?" "I want accountability," I said. "He used our joint bank account to fund this affair. He took advantage of his position to sneak around with a subordinate. He humiliated me, but more importantly, he disrespected the integrity of his role. If this were any other job, it might just be a personal issue. But we both know the military doesn't see it that way." She leaned back in her chair. "And you're prepared for the fallout?" "Absolutely." She closed the folder. Then, "I hope he enjoyed his time with Amanda, because his career is about to take a serious hit." I left the office, knowing that Jason's days of skating by without consequences were officially over. I didn't go home right away. I went to the finance office next, filing to have our accounts separated. I froze our joint credit cards so he wouldn't be able to access my money anymore. I made an appointment with a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. I wasn't wasting any more time. By the afternoon, I was back at home, waiting. Jason was still at work, probably flirting with Amanda, thinking he had gotten away with everything. He wouldn't find out until later that his entire world was caving in. When he did, I was going to be right there to watch. Jason walked in late, looking exhausted, but I already knew why. His entire day had been a disaster, and he had no idea that I was the one who caused it. He sat at the table like he always did, but this time, he wasn't scrolling through his phone or making small talk. He was waiting for me to ask about his day. I didn't. I just watched as he tried to figure out how to start the conversation himself. He finally said that his CO pulled him into a meeting first thing in the morning. Someone had filed a formal complaint against him, a serious one. There were accusations about misconduct, misusing funds, and unprofessional behavior with a civilian contractor. He acted like he was confused, like he had no idea where it came from, but I could hear the edge in his voice. He was nervous. He knew exactly what this was about, but he wasn't sure if I did. I asked him what his CO said. He told me she wasn't happy, that there was going to be an investigation, that if they found anything else, he could lose his position. He could even be discharged. He wanted me to look at him and tell him everything was going to be fine, that I believed him, that I would support him through it. He was waiting for me to play the role of the devoted wife who would stand by his side no matter what. I let the silence stretch before I finally asked if the accusations were true. He scoffed, shaking his head, saying of course they weren't. Someone was trying to set him up. Someone must have had it out for him. He said it with the confidence of a man who had spent his entire life lying and getting away with it. He thought if he denied it strongly enough, I would fall in line and believe him. He still thought he could talk his way out of this. I asked him why someone would go out of their way to ruin his career. He said he had no idea, that maybe someone was jealous or had a grudge against him. He threw out theories like he was just brainstorming possible explanations. He talked about office politics, how people in the unit sometimes had personal vendettas, how sometimes people just wanted to see others fail. He did everything except acknowledge the real answer. I told him the complaint had a lot of information. Bank statements, messages, photos. Someone had been tracking him for months. It wasn't just a rumor or a misunderstanding. It was detailed, precise. I asked if he still wanted to claim it was all fake. His whole demeanor shifted. He sat up straighter, choosing his words more carefully. He said that if someone had been tracking him, then it had to be someone close, someone with access to his personal life. He said that in a way that was almost accusatory, like he was trying to plant the idea that I was the one who had done something wrong, like maybe I had overstepped by looking into him. I didn't take the bait. I told him that whoever filed the complaint must have really wanted to see him held accountable. Maybe they had a good reason. Maybe they were tired of being lied to, humiliated, and treated like they were blind. Maybe they had finally had enough. He stared at me, the realization creeping in. He asked me directly if I filed the complaint. I didn't say anything at first, just let the question sit between us. He asked again, his voice sharper, like he was demanding an answer. I finally told him the truth. Yes, I filed the complaint. Yes, I gave them everything they needed to take him down. Yes, I made sure there was no way out of it. He shot out of his chair like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He asked me if I had any idea what I had done, that this wasn't just some petty argument, that I was destroying his entire life. He kept throwing accusations, trying to make me feel guilty, trying to make me second-guess myself. I didn't flinch. I told him that he destroyed his own life the moment he decided sneaking around with Amanda was worth the risk. The moment he started spending our money on hotel rooms and dinners for someone who wasn't his wife. The moment he decided to lie, over and over again, like I was too stupid to figure it out. He told me I didn't have to do this, that we could fix it, that we could come back from this if I just calmed down. I laughed at that. He had spent months making choices that led him exactly here, and now he wanted to talk about fixing things? Now he wanted to find a solution? I told him there was no fixing it. The divorce papers were already in motion. The financial separation was done. I had locked him out of our accounts. His life with me was over. He asked if Amanda knew. I told him she would soon. She wasn't just his affair partner. She was part of the investigation now, too. The military wasn't going to just ignore her involvement. She had helped him commit fraud. That meant her career was on the line as well. He looked like he was trying to process that, like it hadn't even occurred to him that she would suffer too. I guess he assumed he could get away with anything, that no one would ever face real consequences. I grabbed my keys and told him he had until the end of the night to figure out where he was staying. He started to argue, saying I had no right to kick him out, that it was his house too. I told him it wasn't. His name wasn't on the lease. He had no claim to it. The locks were getting changed in the morning. He wasn't welcome here anymore. He stood there, still trying to process everything. He finally asked if I was really willing to throw away everything we had built together. I told him he was the one who threw it away. He just didn't expect to be the one suffering for it. I walked out, leaving him standing there with the divorce papers in front of him, his career in ruins, his future crumbling. He had spent months lying to me, sneaking around, thinking he was untouchable. But now he had nothing. And for the first time in a long time, I finally felt free. Jason didn't leave that night. He packed a bag, but instead of walking out, he sat at the table like he was waiting for something. Maybe he thought I'd change my mind. Maybe he thought if he stayed long enough, I'd feel bad and tell him he could stay. He kept looking at me like he expected me to say something, but I had nothing left to say. I let him sit there in silence, waiting for a lifeline that wasn't coming. Eventually, he asked if I was really going through with the divorce. I told him it was already in motion. The lawyer had everything they needed. The paperwork was drafted. The financial separation was done. There was nothing left to discuss. He sat back, rubbing his hands over his face, mumbling about how I didn't even give him a chance to explain. I asked him what exactly he thought he could say that would change anything. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. He didn't have an answer because there wasn't one. He tried a different approach. He said we had a good thing once, that we had built a life together, that we had been happy. I told him that might have been true before, but none of it mattered now. He had destroyed everything the moment he decided I wasn't enough. He said it wasn't like that it wasn't about me, that it just happened. I told him nothing about it just happened. He made choices. Every single time he texted her, every time he met up with her, every lie he told me, it was all and now he had to live with those choices. He finally grabbed his bag and stood up. He said I was being cold, that I was throwing away years of our life like it meant nothing. I told him he was the one who threw it away, and now he had to deal with the consequences. He walked to the door, hesitating like he was expecting me to stop him. I didn't. He lingered for another second before finally leaving. The moment the door shut behind him, I locked it. I didn't watch him leave. I didn't wait to see if he would turn around. I just grabbed my phone and sent a message to the locksmith. By the next morning, the locks were changed. He wouldn't be coming back. The fallout spread quickly. The investigation moved fast. Jason had already been on thin ice, and my report was enough to push him over the edge. He was suspended while they reviewed everything, but it was clear where it was heading. He wouldn't just lose his position, his entire career was done. The only question was whether he'd be discharged quietly or if they'd make an example out of him. Amanda wasn't spared either. She tried to downplay her involvement, but the higher-ups weren't buying it. She was placed under review, and soon after, she was fired from her position. She sent Jason a message, blaming him for everything, saying that if he had just been more careful, they wouldn't have been caught. He never responded. A few weeks later, I got a message from a mutual friend. Jason was staying in a cheap motel, barely scraping by while he waited for the final decision on his discharge. His savings were frozen in the divorce, his accounts were locked, and without a steady paycheck, he had nothing. His reputation was destroyed. The people who once respected him wanted nothing to do with him. He had lost everything. He sent me a single text. He didn't ask for money or another chance. He just said, "I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a few seconds before deleting it. I was.